The delighted producer commends her on a job well done. That night, she puts on a skin-tight leather bodysuit and sees that there are only a few hours worth of food matrix left before she needs to switch. Still, the woman chooses to spend the night partying with her friends. Eventually, she returns to the apartment with Troy, and as they're about to do the deed, Sue hears the ringing in her ears and has a nosebleed. So she stumbles to the secret room where she sees Elizabeth struggling due to the empty food matrix bag. However, instead of switching, the woman takes a used canister and extracts a day's worth of stabilizer from the celebrity to buy herself a few hours. Moments later, Sue and Troy continue their intimate moment, but when the man unzips the bodysuit, her organs fall out of her back. Suddenly, Elizabeth wakes up, and upon seeing that the other self's back is fine, she realizes it was just a nightmare. To her horror, she finds that her index finger has aged more rapidly than the rest of her body. After feeling the tenderness of the extraction site on her back and the empty injector next to Sue, she deduces that the other self didn't switch on time. Later, the celebrity calls the hotline regarding the procedure to reverse the effects of substance misuse, but the voice says what's been used on one side is lost on the other. When the woman talks about Sue as if she's another person, the voice reminds her that they are one, and all inconveniences can be avoided as long as they respect the balance. After the call, Elizabeth throws the motorcycle helmet Troy forgot into the hallway and proceeds to clean the apartment. That afternoon, she picks up the refill kit and stops at a diner. Suddenly, the old man sitting at another table mentions how long 7 days is. At first, the woman doesn't know what he's talking about, but then she sees the birthmark on his wrist and realizes that he's the male nurse from the hospital. He continues that it gets more lonely each time he switches, and it gets harder to remember that he still deserves to exist. As the spooked celebrity stands up to leave, the man asks if her other self has already started eating away at her. Outside the apartment building, Elizabeth bumps into Troy, whose disrespect towards her is a stark contrast to how he treats Sue. In the apartment, the woman searches for Fred's number and invites him out for a drink. That evening, she wears a red dress and black gloves to hide the aged finger. After putting on her makeup, the celebrity closes the door to the secret room and she catches a glimpse of Sue's beautiful youthful face. In the living room, she looks up and sees the giant billboard outside the window, so she heads to the bathroom to change up her makeup. Finally satisfied with her look, Elizabeth heads to the front door. However, she catches her reflection on the doorknob and she can't help comparing herself to Sue. In a fit of anger and self-loathing, the woman rubs off her lipstick and aggressively ruins her makeup and hairdo in front of the mirror. Later that night, she receives several messages from Fred asking why she isn't at the restaurant. During filming, she feels a lump protruding from her backside when she bends down, so she heads to the dressing room and moves the mask toward her stomach. Then, she inserts her fingers into her belly button and pulls out an entire chicken leg. Suddenly, the woman wakes up in the secret room and realizes it was just a nightmare. In the living room, she sees a plate of bones and deduces that Elizabeth ate an entire roast chicken in one sitting. That afternoon, Sue tells the hotline that the balance isn't working because she barely has enough time to enjoy herself while the celebrity wastes the week stuffing her face in front of the TV. Later, Harvey informs the star that he wants her to host a prestigious New Year's Eve show, much to her delight. Believing she can't let the opportunity pass her by, Sue disregards the switching schedule and extends her time by extracting stabilizer every day. One day, she tells Elizabeth that she's doing the cover of Vogue magazine, and even though she sees how infected the extraction site is, she still inserts the large needle. Several weeks after the last switch, the celebrity finally wakes up, and to her horror, sees that an entire half of her body has aged decades. The woman calls the hotline and says that Sue doesn't respect the balance and is stealing more and more time from her without consideration of the consequences. So the voice asks if she'd like to stop the experience and return to being on her own, but she looks at the billboard and says she'll try to make everything work out. That night, Elizabeth straightens out her arthritic knee just so she can walk toward the bookshelf. The woman opens the gift and sees that it's a French cookbook. While Sue's interview plays on the TV, the furious celebrity mocks her answers as she cooks in the kitchen. When the host asks for her beauty secret, Elizabeth opens her robe and states that she's responsible for the star's youthful appearance. Then, the woman throws raw eggs on the glass window and covers it up with newspaper so she doesn't have to look at the billboard. After the switch, the furious Sue sees the disgusting state of the apartment. Determined to remain in the new body for as long as she can, the woman gathers several empty glass jars and fills all of them up with a stabilizer. Disregarding the bruised and infected state of the extraction site, she repeatedly inserts the large needle to drain as much fluid as she can. 3 months later, on December 30th, Sue admires the billboard advertising tomorrow's New Year's Eve show. Then, her boyfriend Diego asks if she's coming to bed and she says she'll be right there. The woman heads to the secret room to extract a day's worth of stabilizer, but to her surprise, the fluid is a dark brown color, implying that the body's run out. Panicked, Sue calls the hotline, but the only advice the voice offers is to switch so the original body can replenish the supply. Left with no choice, she crawls to the bathroom to initiate the switch. Diego hears the noise from the bedroom and asks if she's alright. To her horror, the woman sees that she's transformed into a hairless, deformed hunchback. In her anger, she orders the boyfriend to get out, so the frightened man leaves the apartment. Moments later, Elizabeth calls the hotline and says she wants to stop the experience. Then, she drags the large portrait back into the living room. The next day, the celebrity receives a note informing her that the final kit has been delivered, so she retrieves the package and heads directly back to the apartment. The woman drags Sue's body to the living room and injects the termination serum into her chest. However, because both versions share the same consciousness, Elizabeth still craves the attention she gets as her other self, so she stops just before administering the full dose. Realizing she still needs Sue, the woman attaches the switching tubes on their wrists. However, when the blood doesn't flow, she stabs the cannula into the unconscious lady's chest, and the unconventional tactic results in both versions being fully conscious at the same time. Seeing the termination syringe on the floor, Sue realizes what happened, so she flies into a rage and attacks the celebrity. In the bathroom, she slams Elizabeth into the mirror several times, disfiguring her face. Seconds later, the injured woman crawls back to the living room, where the vindictive other self kicks her body until she perishes. Suddenly, Sue remembers that they are one and is horrified by what she'd done. A few hours before the show, the woman gets dressed in her blue ball gown. However, she hears the ringing in her ears and has a coughing fit, so she excuses herself to the bathroom. To her shock, a tooth falls out of her mouth, and she easily pulls out two more. When a production assistant knocks on the door, Sue rinses the blood from her mouth and remembers the leftover activation serum back in the apartment. Moments later, Harvey and the shareholders stop her in the hallway, so she puts on a brave face while making sure they don't see her missing teeth. After the tense conversation, the woman gets on an elevator where she sees a fingernail and ear fall off. Then, Sue runs to the apartment and injects the activation serum into her arm, hoping she produces a better version of herself. As the substance takes effect, the rapidly replicating cells create Monstro Elisa Sue, a grotesque hybrid of both women. As the creature stares at herself in the mirror, Elizabeth's face protrudes from her back, her mouth agape as if in a constant scream. Determined to make it to the show on time, Elisa Sue puts on the blue ball gown, inserts the earrings into her flesh, and fashions a mask using the celebrity's portrait. Later, she walks back to the studio where she imagines the network employees welcoming her with words of adoration. Eventually, the New Year's Eve show begins, and the creature lumbers into the spotlight. She starts her speech, but the freakish voice confuses the crowd. Suddenly, the mask falls off and a globular mass pops out of a mouth on the side of her face. Seconds later, a woman stands up and screams at the terrifying sight, and multiple people call Elisa Sue a monster. The auditorium devolves into chaos, and even though the creature insists that she's still Elizabeth, one man decapitates her with a microphone stand. However, Elisa Sue grows another head, and when her arm breaks off, the severed artery violently sprays blood into the crowd, drenching everyone in the bodily fluid. Soon, the creature escapes into the streets, but her deteriorating body collapses and smashes into viscera in the concrete. Moments later, Elizabeth's face crawls out of the bloody pile and onto her neglected star on the Walk of Fame. As she stares at the stars glistening in the night sky, she remembers how much people adored her. After a brief moment of happiness and peace, the fleshy mass dissolves into a pool of blood. The next day, a floor scrubber cleans up the late celebrity's remains, leaving behind her only lasting legacy, the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.